So we're back. It's been about 4 or 5 days since we mounted this deer, and it's almost completely dry. It's still got a few places where it's just a little bit soft, but most of it's hardened up. So what we're going to do today is clay around the eyes, inside the nose, a little bit on the front lip here, and then paint him up. And then we're also going to repair this drop tine here that's broke off. It's a fresh break. We've got a tine that's almost identical to what was there. So first we'll start claying and getting all the epoxy sculpt put in the nostril. What I'm using is the pink, and it's a 2-part epoxy. I'll just mix it up here real quick. And then I use safety solvent to soften this up, and it just takes a few drops of it. I'll put a little bit out here on the lid. And this really makes it smooth and easy to spread the epoxy. It's almost turns it into like a cream. But I'll just start loading it in there and trying to fill up all these gaps where the skin was cut, trying to hide those cut marks. And I use the fleshy pink because that's the natural color of the inside of a deer's nose. And by using that, I don't have to do quite as much painting on the inside of the nose. And once I get all my clay in there, I'll take the solvent and I'll rub over the top of the clay and smooth it down, and it gives it that flesh look, skin look. And it brings everything together. Now you can't see where the skin was cut on the inside of that nostril. I'm going to come in there with a Q-tip now with some safety solvent on there and really smooth this out. So that side there is done. It doesn't take a lot. When we're skinning our deer, we need to make sure that, you leave enough skin inside that nostril when you're skinning the deer. That way you have some skin to tuck in there and you don't lose all that, and you don't have to do near as much clay work. You can use that skin, and the actual skin looks a whole lot better anyway. But this clay will help hide all the places where it's been cut. And this nostril here, there was quite a bit of skin left over, so I was able to use it, and I don't have to do near as much clay work. Now I'll come in there with the Q-tip and some safety solvent and smooth what I put in there. Smooth it out. And this one will be done. Now we could start with the black. Go around the nose and the eyes. Same epoxy, just a different color. It comes in several different colors: black, pink, brown, tan, just a neutral color, the gray. Most of the colors you need to do a mount for a deer or elk, rams, whatever it might be. All I'm doing here is just sealing that gap that's between the bottom lip and the nose. I'll get a little safety solvent on my scalpel there, or my modeling tool, and just kind of smooth that out. And that solvent also helps us epoxy sculpt stick to the skin better. This is pretty common. I don't know how long ago they come out with this epoxy sculpt. I'm assuming it's been a while back, but it's a very common thing that taxidermists use now. And I like it better than the epoxy clay. The clay seems to crack a little bit more. The epoxy sculpt doesn't shrink, it doesn't crack. Once it hardens, it's there. It's not going to crack or shrink up or anything like the epoxy clay does. Now what I'm doing here is just shoving this clay or this epoxy sculpt down into the crack between the eyelid and the eyeball, where that skin dried just a little bit and it tried to pull away. And all this is doing is rebuilding that eyelid, kind of fattening it up a little bit and making it attached to the eyeball. I'll shove it down in there, and then I'll take my sculpting tool and just kind of run it right down that edge and clean that edge up. And then I can take a little bit of the solvent and put on there, and that really smooths it out, brings it all together. The eyes are probably about the most important on a mount, because unless you're looking at the antlers, the first thing you look at on a mount, at least I do, when I walk in a room, that's the first thing I look at, is the eyes. That draws your attention along with the antlers. But you want these, I like to make them look like they're looking at you, like they're real. You don't see too many mounts anymore with the eyes that are messed up on them. Technology and the equipment that's come out for taxidermy, all the new inventions, has really made taxidermy come a long ways from what it was back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, and even the 90s. It's come a long way. We have the stuff now to make your mounts look really good. We didn't necessarily have the tools and the equipment and even the epoxy sculpt. This stuff here, I don't think we had it back that long ago. I mean, we may have, but I never remembered seeing it. But this type of stuff here is kind of a game changer on making a mount look really good. It works really well for repairing old mounts. If you have an old mount that's, dried, cracked, and been sitting over the fireplace for 20 years and it's just nearly falling apart, you can bring those mounts back to life. You can even rehydrate the skin on them and move the skin around, get it where you want it, and then take the epoxy sculpt and fill in those cracks. And then even take the Static King and add some hair and kind of, bring that mount back to life and make it look like it was when it was first done. So it looks like we've got everything done here. We've got the eyes done, we got the nose done, all the clay work's done on this one. So now we can start painting. And this is lacquer based paint, it's not water based. Lacquer is a whole lot easier to clean up, I think. So basically what I'm doing is going in here and filling in and trying to bring this skin together with this pink, where the pink epoxy sculpt is, and then the skin comes together. I can take this airbrush with the fleshy pink and bring all that together and blend it in really well. And then I'll come back in with the cocoa brown and kind of touch up those hairs that are inside the nostril. So while I've got this pink in here, I like putting a little bit in the corner. and that tear duct in the eye, and then I'll also touch up the ears a little bit. So what I'm doing when I'm putting this pink on here, I can also notice any places I might have missed with the clay work or the epoxy sculpt, because it shows the cracks, and then come back in and paint over it. I'll clean my airbrush each time I change colors. I don't want to mix the colors because it gums up really bad, and it's hard to get the right color you want anyway. But I use this lacquer thinner with a spray bottle, and that cleans it out really well. One thing I forgot to do was put the pink on the nose. Single action, for doing this type of work, it's a whole lot easier. Double action, when you push down this button, then you have to move it back, and that controls how much paint comes out. The single action, you're just pushing this button down, and you can control how much paint comes out with this little nozzle here. For doing this type of work, the single action is the way to go. If you're doing pictures and stuff like that with an airbrush, then the double action might be the way to go. Some people prefer the double action. It could be easier for any person, you know. Your decision. If it's easier for you to use the double action, then by all means go for it. But just touching up stuff like this is a whole lot quicker, I think, and it's just easier for me. Double action is a little harder to control, but once you get the hang of it, I mean, really, it's just like using the single action. Just a little more practice is what's involved with the double action. So I put the fleshy pink on the nose. Now I'm going to wipe this off, and you can see now that it's left that fleshy pink inside those little grooves and stuff on that nose. And that will be kind of like a base coat for when we do the finishing touches. Another good thing about the lacquer paint, you can use these little brushes here, these little detail brushes, to wipe the paint off the hairs, but it'll stick to the skin. You won't clean the skin off. You can use different colors of brown on your deer also. You can use the dark brown, you can use the cocoa brown, and that's what I'm using is the cocoa. It blends in really well with these hairs on the muzzle. And it's the exact color. And to me, it's the exact color that's on this eye. And I'll just go over that real light. Now, try to leave that fleshy pink showing through here, because that's usually what you see on a live whitetail. There's a little bit of pink showing through there, a little bit of that fleshy look. You'll notice I pour my paint back into what's left over, I pour it back into the cans, just because we don't want to waste any paint. This stuff isn't getting any cheaper. And lacquer paint goes a long way in an airbrush. Just a few drops and it goes a long ways. So now after I've painted the cocoa brown on there, I can take this brush, come in here, and scrub these hairs around this muzzle, and these little white hairs that are in here, those will show back up. I'll go around the eyes. The hairs that I painted on the tear duct, I'll scrub them and get those colors back in those hairs around that tear duct. And you can see I never Even though I rub the skin with this, it doesn't take it off the skin. The lacquer paint sticks to the skin really well, but it doesn't to the hair. This brush will take it right off the hair, and that's how you get that soft look. So now I'm going with the nose pad gray. I'll come in at the angle. And the reason I do that at the angle is so I don't cover up those little pink lines in there. I want that to still look fleshy. I'll come in from both sides. And then I'll even come in here and put a little bit in the ears. So I'm going to finish a little touch up with this brush. And then we're going to put the little beads on the nose and bring it back to life. And I like to turn them upside down to start the bottom first. This is a detail bottle. Puts out a very fine bead of Mod Podge. And I'll try and go and hit every little dimple that's on there. And just try and bring this nose back to life. Plump it back up. Sometimes trying to get the light right to where you can see those little beads is important because you get a glare.
What do you do if you actually stick your palm to it and mess it up?
Just wipe it off and start over. You could actually put several layers of this Mod Podge on there, just painting it on, and that would beef up this nose. But when we mounted this deer, I added a bunch of clay to the nose before I mounted it, so we didn't necessarily have to do add any Mod Podge. We didn't have to paint anything on because we'd already beefed it up pretty good. So now we'll put the fan on this and get it to dry pretty quick, and then we'll come back, paint over it with the black, and then we'll put a little black on the eyelids, peel that plastic off of those eyeballs, and we'll be done with that, and then we'll replace this drop tine. So we'll get this moved over here. So we are dried up there on the nose. Now we're ready to put some black paint on there and do the finishing touches. I'm going to come in there at an angle. I'm just going to kind of fade it down. And then I'll come in from the other side and do the same thing.
Hint, hint.
I don't want to step on your feet. And then I'll put a little black line there on the eyelid. Now, not necessarily every deer's nose is black like that. I have seen, a wild deer's nose be a grayish black, or like a really dark gray with the fleshy look at the bottom. And then I've seen some that are just jet black all over. Just depends on, I guess, what time of year it is. and how young or old a deer it might be. A buck that's been rutting, his nose is going to be all scarred up. It's going to be worn down a little bit because he's been tracking. He's like a bird dog. He's looking for does. He's got his nose to the ground all the time, tracking, rubbing that nose on the ground and through the tree limbs. They kind of get scarred up a little bit when they're in the rut. So now we're going to take the plastic off of these eyeballs that I left on there. And all I'm going to do is score that right along that eyelid. I don't want to get into the eyelid. I just want to stay right above it. And I'm going to go all the way around. Try and stay right along the eyelid there. And pops right off. So now I'm going to come in there and put in the nictitating membrane. And what I'm going to use is just a thin layer of black epoxy sculpt. And get it together here. And I need a little bit of solvent that I'll put here on my lid here. Put a little bit of that on my scalp or my tool. Put a piece of epoxy sculpt in there, and I try to roll it up kind of in a half moon shape. And I'll start working it in the corner of this eye, smoothing it out, trying to look like that nictitating membrane. Try to work it into that eyelid and try and make it look like it's underneath the eyelid. I see it more and more nowadays than I did back, when I first started. I didn't see it hardly at all. Now, if you got competition mounts, will always have this. It's important to, if you're doing a competition, to put this nictitating membrane in there. I mean, they look for every detail, and you don't necessarily have to do it this way. You can make nictitating membranes out of different things, out of plastic, and you can insert them at different times too. You don't have to wait till the very end to do the nictitating membrane. You can insert, if you got a plastic piece, you can insert it the same time you do your eyes, even before you put the hide on. But I like to save it for the very end. But it's just because I do it that way doesn't mean it's right. And it does make your eye look, on these deer, it makes them look very real when you add that nictitating membrane in there. It kind of slides around. You can bring it out a little further, say out further in the corner of the eye, to make it look like he's actually working that eyeball, trying to close it to keep it protected. That's what that nictitating membrane is for, is to kind of protect that eyeball, and it's also there to control the fluid in the corner of that eye. And you can make it however you want, especially by using this clay here. You can add or take away however much you need. I have made them. I did make one where it was rubbing a tree one time, and it had its eye up against, like the tree limb was like right here, and I did make that eye a little bit, I made it closed a little more. And then the last thing I'll do is put the clear coat on there. And this will pull that nictitating membrane. It'll, pull it into the eyeball. It'll make it all, look nice and wet and gives it that fluid look. One continuous flow around that eye with fluid will really make this eye pop out. It makes it look like it's a real eye. And I just like to put a little bit of that clear coat in that corner and just let it bleed down and go right along that eyelid. And then I might take and try and blend in that nictitating membrane with the paintbrush. And you see it just bleeds right on around. And then I'll put some on the nose. And I'll just let it bleed down also. I like to put quite a bit on the nose because it acts as a sealer also. But when you're putting this stuff on, it will not bleed into the hair as much. It just stays on the skin part or on the nose pad. And that's where you want it to stay. If it bleeds into the hair, that's okay. What I'm creating is like this deer just licked his nose so he can let the air molecules stick to his nose so he can smell whatever he's trying to locate. He can smell better when those molecules hit that nose. So the wetter I can make that nose look, the better. And you can even put it down inside the nostril, let it bleed down in there and make it look like the inside of his nose is wet. But making that nose look wet on a mount, it makes that mount really pop out. It gives it that clean look, and it just makes the deer look a whole lot better, I think.